Welcome to this new episode of Trini Trent TV, where we talk about the artists, the hits, the songs, the eras, and of course the albums that we love. And one of those albums is truly an iconic body of work, one of my all-time favorites. I'm talking about Janet Jackson's Control. So in this episode of Trini Trent TV, what we're going to be doing is talking about first my story, my earliest recollections and experience of the Control album. Then we're going to be talking about Janet's journey to making the album, how she managed to really put this record forward. Then we're going to talk about how it was received, and then of course its lasting impact on and legacy on the music industry and the world in general. And then of course we're going to end by getting into awesome songs, aka my favorite records from the album. One of my earliest memories of Janet Jackson was the Pleasure Principle video. I just remember being very little, watching, I think it was Channel 4 here in Trinidad. I'm going to fix my clothes, I'm going to make sure I'm looking right. All right, it's a black jersey, Trent. Nobody could see the wrinkles, but say what? I still had to make sure I'm looking good. For me, no. All right. I remembered, I think it was Channel 4 TTT. One of the two stations. We didn't have many channels back then. My mother refused to give us cable, but that's a whole different video. But I remember sitting down watching the Pleasure Principle video, and I remember just being amazed by Janet Jackson. She was actually one of the first American pop stars that I ever took notice of. Michael, Janet, Whitney. Those are like my earliest three. And I remembered it was somewhere around 1994, somewhere around there, 1992 to 1994, somewhere in that bubble. I remembered seeing the Pleasure Principle video, and Janet was just dancing, and I was just amazed because she was in this video by herself. There was nobody else with her, nobody propping her up. She didn't have any support. She didn't have a whole group of background dancers, as I eventually learned that she had her time to time. But in this moment, Janet was by herself. She was on fire, and there was an energy to her. There was a spark to her. And she was so bold. She was commanding her own space. And she wasn't asking anybody else permission to simply be who she was. And to me, that was so inspiring. And as I was discovering myself on this journey with Janet, and as I was really trying to capture that energy, I didn't realize that at that point in her life, that was actually her coming into her own as well. You see, Janet, it was a road to get to that point of Pleasure Principle and the Control album. You might hear a plane passing just now. I'm not living far from the airport. It's pumping closer. But, Janet, she really had to get to this moment of her own breakthrough, of finding herself and standing in her own power. Because, when I was little, and for many years, up until I was probably a late teen, I actually thought that the Control album was Janet's first album. I thought that was her debut album. Little did I know that she had actually put out two other albums before that. She had a self-titled debut album in 1982, and then she had the Dream Street album in 1984. And they were slow sellers. They had some minor little movement on the R&B charts. They didn't really sell a lot. And, they had very small impact. And Janet really had to find her own voice. Janet had to find who she was before she could really step into her own and break through with Control. Janet really wasn't feeling to get into music. She really wasn't focused on it. And on top of that, when she did step into it and she just did what her father told her to do, she was very much cast in the shadows of her brother. She was in the background. She was not able to really get the same level of significance of her more famous brothers, especially Michael. But while she was married, Janet had a little short-term marriage to James DeBarge. Now, it can't be a Jackson without a little drama. She had a short-lived marriage to James DeBarge before the family mashed it up and she decided to get an annulment. But during the time that she was married to him, she rediscovered her love of music. She started to get into writing. She started to get into making music, making sure looking good on the camera. Making sure that, she was really connected to this thing, seeing that she really loved music and really rediscovered her love for it beyond the pressure that her father was putting on her. And during that time also, Janet was paying attention to Michael. Remember, I said she felt she had to live up to what Michael was doing with Thriller. But that pressure actually fueled Janet because, you see, Janet was very close to Michael growing up as children, as teenagers, as young adults. And even into their full life, actually, they were very, very close. But they had a little sibling rivalry. It was a healthy type of rivalry where they didn't hate each other, but they were in constant competition. And she spoke about this in an interview. Let me get my cue card. in Rolling Stone in 1990, where she said, when Thriller came out, I was so envious. It was so incredible. I was going, God, I wish that was me. I was so happy for him, but it was like, why can't that be me? That's what I want to do. That's what inspired me to do Control. I'd love to break any of his records. That would be great for me. I'm going to throw away my cue card. All right, let me make sure it didn't fall on my mother got put in a chair. All right. You see, Janet was really, she felt that competitive edge. She saw what Michael was doing. She saw the breakthrough that he had private Off the Wall and then the explosion that he had with Thriller. And she wanted that for herself. Once Janet put that album out, she really made a name for herself. I think she got like 5 top 5 singles from that album alone. All 5 of the singles that came off of the record, not all of them, but 5 of them went to the top 5 of the Billboard Hot 100. The album went 5 times platinum. That's a huge accomplishment. She actually got a #1 single with When I Think of You. Janet really made a name for herself beyond the shadow of her brothers and beyond Michael. She really defined her own self and she broke free. She did this on her terms, and I think that's what's the most important thing here. She really did it on her own terms. She made the music that she wanted to make, and she made it the way that she wanted to make it, and she worked with the team that she wanted to work with. And what was really significant about Janet's rise with Control was the fact that she had such an impact without pandering to the tastes of white audiences. It wasn't about making music, because you see, back in the 1980s, especially the mid 1980s, at that time, so many artists, in order to get play, especially black artists, in order to get breakthrough and in order to get airplay on pop radio, you had to conform to a certain formula. You had to follow the rules, the unstated rules of how to basically make it in America. And so many black artists would dilute their sounds and strip away so much of the really organic, natural styles of R&B, of funk, of rock and roll. They stripped it away and made it palatable to white people. So you saw an artist like, for instance, Whitney Houston, who faced a lot of criticism in the late 1980s, in the mid to late 1980s, culminating with her getting booed at the Soul Train Awards, because many people felt like the ballads that she was singing, like Where the Broken Hearts Go, All at Once, these type of records, they were really so diluted that they seemed to have no soul, no grit. Like Whitney was a great singer, but the music lacked that organic, authentic blackness that so many people look for in R&B and soul. And Janet was able to rise to success without following Whitney's formula, without doing what so many other black artists were doing at the time. Instead of saying, okay, I need to make this type of record so that I can get airplay, she sat back and said, no, I am going to make my own sound and stand up as a black woman on my own terms. And so few black artists found a way to do that without sitting in the box that was assigned to black artists. For instance, we had Prince. Prince was one of those artists who really broke free on his own, and he was a huge influence on Janet and the Control record, because you see, that Minneapolis sound that Prince helped to develop, that he was the pioneer of, it found its way into Control. And Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, and Janet, they built on that. So Janet, as she built on Prince's work and as she found her own voice, she became one of those rare gems, those rare artists who were able to, black artists who were able to find their voice on their own terms. And it was very intentional. As a matter of fact, I'm going to get my second cue card. Jimmy Jam spoke about this in a 2015 interview with Rolling Stone magazine, and he said, the "what have you done for me lately" concept was just that attitude we always thought about her. So we made a sassy record lyrically. It became a catchphrase. It really changed a whole lot of things. The only way to get on pop radio, if you were black, was basically to put a ballad out. Now, all of a sudden, you have this aggressive, hard-hitting female singing. It changed the way radio sounded. We'd walk through neighborhoods and hear Janet blasting out of people's houses. You see, what he was saying here was that they found a way, and with a very intentional mindset, to make the music as black as possible and stay true to who Janet was as a person. And the goal that Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, and Janet had when they were putting this album together, the Control album, was to be counterculture. To be standing in your blackness and to make a record that was so boisterously black, so unashamedly African American in its art form, was to be counterculture at this point in the 1980s. In 1986, when the album came out, I forget to say when the album came out, and I read so far in the video. Excuse me now. You know what time it is in the day and in my age. Anyway, this is what Jimmy Jam said. We wanted to do an album that would be in every black home in America. Ignore the car passing. We were going for the black album. Gritty, raw. You see here? When they're talking about this, they were going for the black album. They wanted an album that was going to be the presence and the center of the black experience. He said, when a song was on the charts at that time for us, it was not a hit. That was when you heard your friend play it, or you walked into the supermarket and you hear it playing over the box, or you walk into the clothes store and they got the tape in. The tape. That's what we were going for. So the goal here was really to make an album that not only was going against the grain, but it also empowered black people, because by listening to this record, you felt that this was music for you, and this was music that you didn't have to excuse and find a way and explain. This is my music. This is my story. And I felt that by them putting this album out, it really was so significant for African American people and the way that it changed and impacted pop culture. Oh, go on, boy, looking pale. Work with me. You know what time it is. You see, what Janet, Terry, and Jimmy did in that era of their lives, in the mid-1980s, 1986, throughout the end of the 80s, all the way up to the Rhythm Nation album that came out in 1989, what they did was spark a shift in popular culture. And they helped to transition music from where it was kind of stuck in the 1980s, where R&B and pop, it just seemed not to be moving forward. It seemed to be kind of going in circles. With the downfall of disco, music hadn't had a major breakthrough. We had the work of Rick James and we had the work of Prince, but on a general landscape, it hadn't really moved forward. So what they helped to do was push music forward. They helped to propel it into the next decade. And that actually is kind of parallel by the work of Timbaland, Missy Elliott, and Aaliyah actually a decade later in the mid to late 1990s, with the 1 in a Million album onward, they helped to transition music and black styles of music into the next decade. So you kind of see how history repeats itself in a very beautiful way. But Janet was more than just a muse. Janet wasn't just along for the ride. I have to keep emphasizing Janet, Jimmy, and Terry because they worked together. It was a collaboration. Janet was very much involved. Oh, God, I'm looking like Casper, looking like a Pikachu. Janet was very much involved in every aspect of the music. As a matter of fact, in an interview while talking on the Red Bull Music Academy in 2019, Jimmy Jam said this. Jimmy always talking. Poor Terry. Terry just sitting down there smiling and nodding. But Jimmy said this. Nobody had ever asked her what she wanted to write about or sing about. He's talking about Janet. Well, first of all, nobody asked her to write. Nobody asked her what she wanted to sing about. They just gave her songs and we were like, no, you've got to be a part of the process here. And that's how the Control record started. And it obviously ended up being a very pivotal record in all of our careers. Janet was very involved in the development of Control. What Janet did was she was part of the writing because she co-wrote most of the music. She co-produced most of the music. And she even played on the keys. She even played the keyboard, put a lot of digital elements like the digital piano, the digital bells. Janet was involved. And it was her narrative, her experiences that really shaped the flow of the record. You see, Janet's songs on the Control album and in many aspects of her career have been so autobiographical. She was telling her story. And in each of these different moments, she was showing how she was standing up in the face of patriarchal norms. She was saying that I am not going to conform. I'm not going to do what men want me to do. And I'm not a plaything. I'm standing up as my own person. When you hear songs like Control, the title track of the Control album, What Have You Done For Me Lately? And even the song Nasty, Janet was showing how she was standing up for herself and as herself as a woman. As a matter of fact, in an interview with Jimmy Fallon, on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon in 2020, when she was promoting the Black Diamond tour, tour. COVID ready come and mash up everything, eh? But she said this about how she wrote Nasty. We were staying downtown in a hotel, a loft. And walking out of the hotel, there were like 5 or 6 older guys standing up against the wall, and they were being basic, and they just basically started messing with us. And I didn't like it very much. I was pretty embarrassed, actually pretty upset. And I came back to the studio and I told Jimmy and Terry about my experience, and it turned into the song Nasty. You see, on Nasty, let me show you my cue card. On Nasty, Janet really was telling you she's not a plaything. She's not here to be objectified by men, and she's not just there for their own satisfaction. You can't just talk to me, ignore the noise in the kitchen. You can't talk to me just any which way. And throughout the control era and beyond, Janet has constantly recasted and redefined her idea of femininity in a patriarchal world. And she is constantly challenging norms. I mean, just starting with the control era, we look at Janet and how she performed in, sometimes she would come out in all black, completely covered up and wearing a jacket and dancing hard. And you know, she was still feminine, but she was just as tough as the guys. And as a matter of fact, when she would dance on stage, she was dancing harder than the men around her. And she was really showing you that she could stand up not just as one of the guys, but she could do everything they could do and do it even better. And she made sure that she was involved. She made sure that nobody was just going to direct her and tell her what to do. So now let's talk about awesome songs. Now this is a very short album. It only has 9 tracks. It's basically a EP, but it is still my favorite Janet Jackson album. And I have to start off with, I know I mentioned this song several times, but I have to start off with, What Have You Done For Me Lately? This is truly one of my favorite records. I love the attitude that she brings to it. I love how she's in your face. I love the way that she just punches the record through. You know, her attitude matches the music. You know, when you have this hard-hitting production, she sings it in this same hard-hitting way. And every time you watch her perform it, there's like a judge, you know, you see the shoulders going, and Janet is in your face. I just love how empowered she is throughout the record. Another awesome song is When I Think of You. This was actually the #1 song on the Billboard Hot 100 from this album. But I love this record. I love the shimmering keys. I love how it just, when you hear it, it brings out my favorite aspects of the 80s music. It just makes you feel alive and joyful. Even the way she sings it, it almost like you could hear her smiling while she sings this record. You know, Janet has a way. She knows how to make and Jimmy Jam said this while talking on that Red Bull Music Academy. Janet has a way of making a melody so infectious because you feel what she's feeling as she's singing the record. And I really love the song, and I also love the music video. I love the video. It is one of my favorite videos from Janet because it's like a play. And that's what she really wanted. She wanted the music video to feel like a musical. And it reminds me of so many of my favorite 80s movies, especially Little Shop of Horrors, that musical, because you get that, you know, it starts off on the street, you see people shaking out their old blanket and all the feathers, and, you know, you're moving through. It's like you're following this one single shot almost. You're following the camera and you're seeing Janet going from scene to scene, and you really want to know what happens next. And the final awesome song I'll give you off of this record is the title track, Control. This is like an anthem for me. It's a declaration. Who track is that? Hey, it's a declaration. It's a moment of empowerment, and it has been an anthem for me for many years. I remember when I first moved to New York, this was a song I always used to be singing in my apartment and trying to do the little routine. Wasn't my best moment, but I tried. You know, Janet really gave you an anthem. It was an empowering moment. And it set the tone for the whole album. If you could get past the forever long introduction. Here now, Janet, I don't know what that introduction take forever. That was like half the song. But once you could get past that and you get into the record, you just have to move with it because you feel like she's really lifting you up and telling you, you could do this. You could take control. Listen, the Control album really is something special. It really is something special. It was a moment for me to sit down and listen to this record and really feel like I was being taken on a journey from start to finish. I love the song, the title track, and I love the record in itself. I think that Janet really made something special for us as fans of popular culture, but especially for young Black people, to see somebody who was young and empowered and making music and defining her life on her own terms. That really was something. It was really a magical moment. And all I can say is thank you to Janet, thank you to Jimmy Jam, and thank you, Terry Lewis. Oh, go on. Poor Terry. Always the dog in the corner. But thank you, Terry. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Trini Trent TV. I had a lot of fun doing this record. It gave me something to do other than focus on COVID and elections. It really got me up. And I hope you enjoyed it too. Leave a comment in the comment section below. What is your favorite song from this album? What is your favorite song from Control? Tell me 3. I gave you 3, so you tell me your 3. Do you agree with my 3? Let's have a conversation. And I'll catch you next time. Anyway, let me go and relax myself. Let me get recentered and start my day. Thank you very much, and I'll catch you next time here on Trini Trent TV. Later.